Okay, simple summary for this week. We're going to cover a lot of ground because this is the final module, and we want to connect the previous modules, which came deliberately out of chronological order. So the goal for this video is to cross a few decades from the early 1800s, when the United States acquired the Louisiana Territory, and go all the way to the end of the Civil War, about 60 years later. And the common thread of the subject matter is that the United States was growing as a country, adding new territories, which then became states. And then, while that's a good thing, right, the country gets bigger and stronger and more prosperous, there's a potentially fatal undercurrent in that growth, because are those states going to be free? Are they going to be slave states? And those debates in the end, are what led to the Civil War. Okay, so here's the basic story. I've already talked about the events of the Louisiana Purchase in the written lecture, but that's kind of the origin of all of the problems. Not that it caused a sectional crisis immediately, but you have all this new land. The size of the country doubles at once, and people want to settle that land. It's important to understand Louisiana, the state, is a small state in the United States. It's just one of 50. The Louisiana Territory is like the whole big middle part of the country from Canada down to the Gulf of Mexico. It's gigantic. Those are going to be several states. Are they going to be free, or are they going to be slave? That led to the next connective piece of tissue, which is the Missouri Compromise, because Missouri wanted to enter the Union as a slave state. And the people who were against letting slavery grow, were like, we don't want to do that. So there was the first compromise, which resulted in slavery not being allowed in some parts of the country and being allowed in others, which, just think about that. That's not going to work in one country, but that held things together for a while, right? And then in 1846, the United States went to war with Mexico and won that war. And as a result of that, got a bunch more land in what is now California and Arizona and that part of the country. Again, new problem. Is it going to be free? Is it going to be slave? And it's not just about the states that are free or slave getting their way. It's much more important than that, even though that's important whether it's allowed. It's about control of Congress, because a new state, if it's admitted to the Union, is going to get 2 senators, and it's going to get however many congressmen it has. Why can't I talk? However many members of Congress that they're allowed to have based on their population. So you admit, say, California, with a lot of people. Now there's 2 California senators who are voting for free state stuff. And if they have a lot of people, which they do now, not quite so much in the 1850s, that's 45 members of Congress that are from California. So it could tip the balance of power in the Congress between free and slave. It wasn't just about what was going on in the particular state. That's really what causes the crisis that leads to the Civil War. Is the southern states don't want to feel like they're being told what to do by the North, and the North doesn't want to see slavery continue to expand into new states so that they become the minority. The trigger was the election of 1860. When Abraham Lincoln was elected, he was the first Republican president. And the Republican Party was founded in the 1850s largely on the issue of slavery. It was not to get rid of slavery. That was not anybody's position, virtually anybody's position back then. It was just about whether it was going to be allowed in certain states or others. Lincoln and the original Republicans, the OG Republicans, were not necessarily abolitionists. They wanted to prevent any further expansion of slavery. But that's not how he was characterized, and his political enemies were like, oh no, he's going to try to take it all away. And the South essentially freaked out when Lincoln was elected in 1860 and said, well, we're going to leave the Union. South Carolina started it, other states followed. That secession is how you get the Civil War. They were tried to leave the United States because they were concerned that a Republican president and would limit slavery. And it's ironic too, because he wasn't going to do that. As I mentioned in the lecture, Lincoln's primary goal was to preserve the Union. And he literally said, if I can save the Union by getting rid of slavery, I'll do that. And if I can save the Union by keeping slavery, I'll do that. And if I can save the Union by keeping it in some places and get rid of it in other places, I'll do that. His goal was to save the Union. Slavery was not automatic to go away under Lincoln. So you have the Civil War, and it's a shame to take something that deserves its own entire course and talk about it for a couple of minutes in one module. But you can see in the lecture how it went. The Union had more people and more money and more industry. They had more everything, really, except for good generals. The South had better generals. Finally, I'm oversimplifying here, the Union finds a good general in Grant and starts to win the war based on the idea that if you have 100 people and you're fighting 40 people, the 100 people should win. Finally, that's what happens. And after 4 years of suffering and 600,000 dead Americans, I mean, think about it this way. When the United States goes to war against Germany, who's killing American soldiers? The Germans. That's not good. You go to war in Korea and North Koreans or Chinese kill American soldiers. Also, still not good. But in the Civil War, when Americans are killed, I mean, it seems obvious, but if you stop and think about it, they're killed by other Americans. Sometimes these people knew each other. Sometimes families were like, the one brother would go fight for the North and one would go fight for the South. And all these generals in the North and the South, most of them went to West Point. Most of them had been in the United States Army. When Robert E. Lee led his forces onto the field as a Confederate general, and he looked on the other side and he saw an army that he was preparing to fight and kill, what flag was that army flying under? It was flying under the Stars and Stripes, under the American flag. That's a tough thing for people to handle. Some people call General Lee a traitor because of it, or all Confederates. I think that's a little harsh. But then again, think about the cause they were fighting for. It's hard to defend. Americans versus Americans. This is the great tragedy of the Civil War. And I'm not going to get into modern politics, but if you stop and think about it, there's some American versus American stuff going on now, and that's just for you to think about on your own time. That kind of wraps up the chronology of what we're talking about in this module, except for one or two things. The war ended unofficially when Grant accepted Lee's surrender at Appomattox Courthouse, Virginia, in April of 1865, and Lincoln finally could start to relax and breathe and be less depressed and that sort of thing. And he only got 5 days because he went to the theater, and we know what happened. He was assassinated. I call him the last casualty of the Civil War. It's not true. Other people died afterwards, but it is a shame that he only had a few days to enjoy peace. And the other piece of it is the 13th Amendment, which did make slavery illegal in this country. It wasn't ratified until December, which is, that's the 12th month. Lincoln died in April. That's 8 months after Lincoln's assassination. But it was passed by the Congress while Lincoln was still alive. He knew it was going to happen, and he can claim credit for it. In the end, he did free the slaves. Even if that wasn't his goal, even if his attitudes on race in 1861 would not be okay now, nobody's attitudes on race in 1861 would be okay now. There's a reason he has that gigantic memorial in Washington, and I would think it's pretty clear, I don't think I'm saying anything controversial, that he deserves it. So that's the story that I wanted you to understand today. The 60 years of the American nation growing and becoming more prosperous and getting more people and making more money, and things are great, but at the expense of millions of people who were held in bondage. And their story is the sort of nasty little undercurrent that makes us less than perfect. You know, I think most religions regard human beings as fallible and imperfect, and this is an example of that. I don't think that the South, and I'm not saying this because I live in Texas, but I don't think the people of the South should be treated as villains. But I also don't think they should be treated as heroes. I think they should be treated as people who did what they thought was right. And maybe they weren't right. It's hard to defend it morally. So I leave this to you in this last module to think about on your own, and I have questions for you about it, especially that final question where I ask for your opinion. Just stop and let those critical thinking skills spin a little bit in your head, and let's see what your thoughts are about this. Okay, that's all.